Julian Popov couldn't join us, and I will therefore step in his shoes, although it's impossible to fill such shoes as those Julian Popov, but I will do my very best. Of course, this panel looks very much like a conference in its own, so we will have to be quite brief in our interventions, and I do trust all of my panelists that they will actually stick to the time slot allocated of around 7 to 10 minutes. I absolutely dislike interrupting people, but in case we do run massively over time, I will have no choice but to do it. It's fantastic that we have a panel dedicated to renewables and energy efficiency, not least because in a recent article that was published just last week in the New York Times, dedicated to Romania's energy potential, there were actually many opinions and a huge overview on how Romania can become a clean energy powerhouse in Europe, but the word renewables did not show up once in the article. I performed a word search, and unless my search function isn't working and my reading isn't working, this aspect was completely missing from the picture. Which was surprising. I'm sure a couple of months ago, or even so, maybe this would have been a part of the debate. And so I think it is important to just remember that the idea of Romania becoming a clean energy powerhouse has actually been around, and we discussed it at the previous edition of Romanian Energy Days. And at that point in time, there were combinations of technologies, and offshore wind and hydrogen brought up in the discussion, and there are many ways to actually reach this status. In fact, Romania is destined to become a clean energy powerhouse in Europe. But of course, it matters how we will get there. And it matters not just in terms of technologies, but it also matters from the perspective of cost effectiveness. So that is where actually it's interesting to have a discussion on renewables at this point, because of course, Romania was a frontrunner in renewable deployment up until 2016, when renewables were still expensive. But in the meantime, while the world has seen a revolution in the decrease of cost of renewables, in Romania, we have actually slowed down the deployment of this technology. So ironically, if one was to look from the outside, one would actually have the impression we like to go for investments while they're expensive, but we somehow don't go and reap the full benefits of the technologies when their costs decrease. So I would like to ask about this in the panel. And finally, we've been discussing today a lot the big centralized vision for Romania becoming an energy hub. And indeed, this is really important. But what is equally important is that when we think big for Romania, we also accept that we have to think small sometimes. Let's remember just very briefly the country we're talking about. It's 45% rural population, low density. And when we actually look at villages and semi-rural areas in Romania, we actually see that the network is overhead wires, and it does raise questions about how we're actually going to be decarbonizing through electrification the sectors that are critical and part of the Fit for 55 package, for example, transport and buildings. How are we going to be able to bring half of the country with us, or to actually, how can they actually have more localized value chains, and whether there is actually a big picture for renewables, and whether we should actually be talking about small-scale renewables, distributed storage communities, and the social welfare that comes from that, as well as to what extent that can help us reduce volatility in electricity prices. So this will be the angle that I would like to bring into the panel. And of course, the panel is bringing the biggest experts in the field, so it is quite rich in that sense. So we'll have a chance to debate them. And I would actually like to already invite the panelists to join us, for those who are actually in the room. So we have Ms. Valburga Hemmetsberger. We have Mr. Giles Dixon. I should also say, so Giles is joining us from Wind Europe, and Valburga is joining us from Solar Power Europe. They are both the CEOs of these respective organizations. We also have Ms. Yolanda from the European Commission. She's the Deputy for Interinstitutional Policy Coordination and Planning. Next, we have Mr. Andres Safar, who's the Country Manager for CEZ Romania. Okay. Also from the utilities side, we have Mr. Alessio Menegazzo, who's the Head of Sustainability and Institutional Affairs for Enel Romania. Also, a surprise, a positive surprise was to learn that we also actually have someone from the EIB joining us, Ms. Monica Peña Sastre, who is unfortunately not listed in the booklet, but she actually is listed in the conference program. So I'm glad we have her here. And last but not least is Mr. Bruce Douglas from Communications and Business Director, Electric. And so with a full panel, I will be joining them, but I would firstly like to present the two keynote speakers for this panel, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their take on where we are at this point in time, and also what's been shared here now, and what is the role of renewables and energy efficiency in meeting not just the targets of the European Union for 2030, but also for helping us overcome the current predicaments we're faced with. So with that having been said, I'd like to invite Mr. Christian Boucher to join us. He is the chair of the European Parliament Committee for Industry, Research and Energy. Mr. Boucher, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, distinguished audience. I'm very happy to be here, and I congratulate the organizers for organizing such an interesting event. And I'm very sorry that at some point I have to go back to the Parliament, as 2:30 the Industry, Research and Energy Committee will have its meeting, and I will have to chair the meeting. But I will say a few words on how the European Parliament in general, and the committee that I'm chairing is special because my colleague and friend Siegfried Murashan will go a little bit into detail on the financing part and RRF synergies, how much the ITRE committee is committed to support the REPowerEU plan and the deployment of renewables in particular. But of course, since 2007, when Romania joined the European Union, there was never a situation close to the one experiencing now. A war raging on EU's border, on our country's border, and threatening the stability of Republic of Moldova also, and the rise of energy prices at a level extremely dangerous that we have to tackle with much more ambition. Already before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we are experiencing unprecedented energy prices and volatility, and embarked on a path of substantial transformation of the energy sector. We were facing intensified geopolitical tensions and profound uncertainty and complexity in Europe's energy security of supply. But we have also a plan, REPowerEU, and this plan was first announced in March, and then on 18th of May, it was released a more detailed plan by European Commission that clearly outlines the objectives of our long-term development towards the Union being the leader in modern energy technologies that aim also to ensure full independence and security of supply. Immediately, the Parliament, the committee that I'm chairing, we welcome both packages. We'll be voting this plenary on Thursday on the gas storage that we have concluded in a negotiating speed in an urgency procedure. In some weeks, we realized to have all the negotiations with the Council concluded. However, we must also recognize that there are not quick fixes for today's challenge, and that only together in solidarity, policymakers, civil society, and companies, extremely important, can work to tackle these common challenges. On one way, we have to mitigate the risks on the energy sector that we will be facing. And of course, on the other way, we need to continue to work towards Green Deal, towards decarbonization of energy sectors, and of our industries in general. Many more structural issues will have to be addressed, of course. And for that, we have the second part of the Repower EU with its main updates on increase, red targets, and EED targets supported by the majority of the political groups. At least this is what we have until now. The Commission, you know well, I will not insist on that, proposed to enhance long-term energy efficiency measures, including an increase from 9 to 13%. At the same time, massive scaling up and speeding up of renewable energy in power generation, industry, buildings, and transport will accelerate our independence, give a boost to the green transition, and reduce prices over time. That's why, even before the Repower EU communication and plan of action came and was announced by European Commission, the ITRE committee asked European Commission to revise the initial impact assessment of the target of 40%, and we asked European Commission to look to the 45%, and we were very happy to see that 45% is the new target proposed by the package, and this I'm very sure will be supported and voted by European Parliament. We'll also support the creation of a dedicated EU solar strategy to double solar photovoltaic capacity by 2025 and install 600 gigawatts by 2030. Extremely relevant also for our country, for Romania, a solar rooftop initiative with a phased-in legal obligation to install solar panels on new public and commercial buildings and new residential buildings. Of course, we have different dates for that. And this combined with renovations while promoting self-consumption and energy communities, doubling the rate of deployment of heat pumps and measures to integrate geothermal and solar energy in modernized district and communal heating systems. Of course, a Commission recommendation to tackle slow and complex permitting for major renewable projects, extremely relevant also for Romania, as maybe we are not the slowest in European Union, but still, in order to get all the permits, there is a lot of time, and it's one of the main barriers that the industry are telling to the policymakers that they have to overcome. Now the signal and the input will come from European institutions. We are grateful to European Commission for proposing that, and I'm sure that during the legislative phase between Parliament and the Council, maybe even more ambitious targets will be set. At least this is my perspective on this issue. Because we started a little bit later, I will shorten my speech because most of these proposals are well known by you. What is extremely important is that until now there is a clear understanding, at least in the European Parliament, but also I'm sure speaking with my colleagues from the government, the Prime Minister, with the Minister of Energy, with most of the colleagues in the coalition of government in Romania, that we need to accelerate the renewables, the deployment of renewables, the new capacities of producing electricity. It's a response on the medium term, not only to the energy of security supply and of course replacing Russian gas imports in Europe and in Romania also by using more ambitious way the renewables, but it is also a good response to the volatility of prices. My personal conviction is that on the medium term, when most or a lot of our energy mix will come from renewables, we will not see anymore the energy used as a geopolitical weapon. We will not see anymore this volatility of prices. We will not see anymore the spikes, the high increase of prices in some periods, in many times related to the political or geopolitical situations. And of course, do not forget that we are all committed, and I saw a strong commitment also from the industry on the Paris Agreement climate targets, on the Green Deal targets, with the intermediary Fit for 55 2030 targets. Maybe it's not a lot of enthusiasm everywhere. Maybe we should look a little bit to the details. It's clear that we need a balanced transition. We should not forget about the competitiveness of our industries. We should not lose jobs. We should see what is feasible. We should take into account that some countries will need more time in order to phase out some of the fossil fuel production capacities, but the target is there, and we need to go in this direction. So a strong support for renewables from the European institutions, from European Parliament, and a big chance, a big opportunity for Romania to attract investments, to use European funds, to use PNRR, RRF, Romanian RRF, to use the modernization fund opportunities, to attract private investments from companies already present in Romania, others that are very welcome and will come into Romania soon, and also to be competitive in this sector and to be aligned with the European tendencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boucher, and we really appreciate your time and your availability for being here. It's a pity you have to leave, but I promise you that I will keep alive some of the questions that you've raised, particularly around the need to accelerate our investments and also our transition. I would like to actually invite now the second keynote speaker, who is Mr. Siegfried Murashan. He is a member of the European Parliament for Romania, and he is the vice leader of the EPP group in the European Parliament. He has actually been kindly introduced by his colleague, Mr. Boucher, when he referred to the Resilience and Recovery Fund. So I'd be delighted to hear from your side, how can this fund help us accelerate renewable and energy efficiency deployments?
Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. Of course, the transition to a green economy, tackling climate change, improving energy efficiency, these have been priorities of the European Commission, of the European Parliament, of the European institutions since 2019. But of course, the first elements of the strategy were presented at the beginning of 2020 with the crisis generated by the coronavirus hitting just 2-3 months later, and with the unjustified invasion of the Russian armed forces into Ukraine 2 years later. What I am trying to say is tackling climate change, reducing pollution, should be a long-term process which we continue to pursue irrespective of crises, irrespective of developments. But of course, taking these into account, saving the planet cannot be something that we are doing just when there is no other crisis to deal with. But of course, both the COVID crisis and now Ukraine do have an impact upon the economy, do have an impact upon the supply chains. They affect the investment capacities of enterprises, and this has to be taken into account. This is why throughout this process of a transition to a green economy, we have to support the vulnerable categories of consumers. We have to take into account local specificities. And of course, particularly for my political family, center-right, we have to do this transition together with the industry, not against the industry. This is why we are advocating for an approach which is based on investments, on research, on innovation, not on restrictions. We are advocating for an approach based on impact assessments. We should know the impact of a measure before we are committing to it. This is why also for us as policymakers, the impact of the potential of the planned decisions upon you is very important. This is why my kind invitation, request, always when you hear there's legislation in preparation, particularly with the Commission, whenever you have impacts upon you as enterprises, as industries, as member states of the Union, please do let us know, because we need to make decisions based on facts and in full awareness of the impact of our decisions. Of course, the transition to the green economy will be likely defined, marked as a success or a failure based on its financing. It will be the financing, our capacity to provide enough investments, that will decide whether this transition to the green economy will be a success or a failure at European level. The needs, the amounts needed to realize this transition, you know better than myself, but it is clear that we will only be able to succeed through a joint effort of private and public sectors, through investments both at local and at national level, but also at European level. None of us will be able to to succeed by its own. We, from the side of European public money, are ready to do our part. We have committed that 30% of all funding, of all money which the European Union will be spending between now and 2027 will go into projects which have a green component. From the budget of the European Union, which is about 1,100 billion euros, it will be about 27%. From the newly created Recovery and Resilience Facility, 672.5 billion euros. From there, it will be 37%. This is legally required, so that on average, the EU will invest 30% in projects which lead to more energy efficiency, to reducing pollution, reducing CO2 emissions, and tackling climate change. This measure, making greening a key component of EU expenditure, is something that is here to stay. I am sure that investments into digital and investments into greening will remain as long-term priorities of the Union, of the EU budget, also after 2027. We should make the most of the instruments that we have before thinking about the creation of new instruments. We are, as a European Union, not as bureaucratic as people think, not as intransparent, not as slow as people think, but still it is slower to create a new instrument than it is to make use of an existing instrument. This is why I am saying that, yes, a social climate fund will be created, a modernization fund will be created. But for example, for the Recovery and Resilience Facility, it was proposed in May 2020, after the eruption of the COVID crisis. We agreed on legislation a bit less than a year later. Money starts flowing now, 2 years after the initial proposal. So what I'm trying to say is it is always quicker to access funding from an existing EU instrument than it is to create a new one or to wait for a new instrument. This is why also for the industry, for the private actors, focus as much as you can on making the most of existing instruments, the current budget of the European Union and the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is in place. Each member state of the Union had to present to the European Commission their plan. Some of the plans have not yet been approved, but most of the plans have been approved, including the Romanian plan, with the European Commission being very reluctant to change and amend these plans for good reason. Because once a plan was made and approved, it has to be implemented, it shouldn't be changed. But of course, the war in Ukraine, particularly when it comes to investments in energy, offers a justified platform for amendments, for changes. This is why also in the European Parliament, we are going to adopt this week the first implementation report on the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the implementation in which we will offer our first analysis 1 year after the entry into force of the legislation, after we have seen the plans of member states and we have witnessed the first stages of the implementation. And you will see the European Parliament in the report that will be adopted this week, Thursday morning. You will see the European Parliament making the case for allowing member states to amend their plans, particularly for investments in energy interconnectors, in cross-border energy projects, in projects which reduce our dependency on Russian fossil fuels. The Parliament really believes that cross-border projects mean that one can transport energy from where we have it to where we need it, with this being also a premises for political unity at European level. It is now the discrepancy with regards to the dependency of member states on Russian gas and oil, which do not allow them to move ahead with reducing their consumption of Russian gas at the same pace. The more we manage to interconnect, the more we can move ahead together. So this is why investments in such cross-border projects will be very much supported also by the European Parliament. So no to amendments of the national recovery plans on unjustified reasons, on political reasons, but a clear yes from the European Parliament side on objective reasons, and of course the Russian invasion into Ukraine, where we've learned that we have to reduce energy dependency, is such a objective reason. We still have in the Recovery and Resilience Facility 220 billion euros of unspent, unused money. As you know, the facility offers about half of the amounts in forms of grants to member states and half of the amount as loans. Many member states have not yet accessed their loans component fully. They say, yes, the grants, of course, we want. It is money for free, but the loans is money that we have to give back. Some member states thought twice before accessing it, particularly when they could access loans under similar conditions from the markets without the conditionality, which is enshrined in the Recovery and Resilience Facility. But now with investment needs increased at national level, with financing conditions on international markets worsening, we are seeing member states more interested in accessing their loans component. And of course, these investments should also go into cross-border energy projects. It is also something that the European Parliament is supporting. On solar, on wind, on clean energy, of course, I can just underline what Chairman Christian Boucher, what our colleague friend Christian has said. That is the position of the Industry and Energy Committee of the European Parliament, supported by the majority of members. Just to conclude, of course, we have to make sure that from a Romanian perspective, decisions made at European level do not harm us, take our national specificities into account. Wherever we need adjustments, as Christian was saying, longer phasing out periods, we should, of course, work for them, fight for them. This is why the delegated act on taxonomy with reference to gas and nuclear is so important to Romania, and we should support its entry into force, reject any objection. Nonetheless, because we all need long-term predictability when it comes to investments and financing in this area. As I said, we need to make sure that decisions do not harm us. We need to make sure that our voice is heard. But of course, the trend to more greening is here. It is here to stay. And what we should avoid at any cost is quality of life discrepancies between our country and other Western European countries increasing in the future, because if young people of Romania, when traveling to Rotterdam, Copenhagen, or other Western European cities, see their cities being cleaner, less polluted, with the more renewable energy sources, that is, of course, a premises for young, well-educated Romanian people leaving the country, for economic discrepancies widening, and that is a process that we should avoid at any place. So convergence with the rest of Europe is something that at the end of the day we should realize. I will stop here. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Like Christian, at some point I have to return to parliamentary duties, but thank you very much for the invitation. Looking forward to following interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the fantastic keynote speech, and it's very reassuring to hear just the plethora of solutions that the European Parliament is currently looking at and exploring together with the rest of the European institutions. It's also very nice, as we are in the context of Romanian Energy Days, to hear messages that I'm sure resonate to the audience as much as they resonate to the panel. I think nobody in this room wants to see a discrepancy across the European Union in terms of innovation or yes, moving ahead, investments and everything that we are actually going through this process as a united European Union. So it's very nice to hear that this is at the core, at the heart of the discussions in Parliament. And since you've referred to industry, I'm delighted to actually have several industry representatives on this panel, and I will be asking them some tough questions, particularly around the speed at which we can move and what we need to be moving as quickly as we actually have to in the face of the current crisis. Valburga, I will first refer to you, and we have heard about the fantastic plan for solar for 2025. This has been mentioned by Mr. Boucher, and I would be curious. I have two questions to ask. The first one is about supply chains and whether you feel that the current supply chains are intact to be able to accelerate the whole transition the way that we need it. There have been some discussions about solar inverters. I would like to hear from you on that. And the second one is in terms of the scale of distributed small scale, let's say rooftop PVs. And so we need really gigawatts of that. So how do we move to get that? And in a country like Romania, can we consider places, so for example, non-agricultural wide spaces, I don't know, lignite mines or other sorts of spaces to actually be, let's say, good candidates for such projects? Thank you.
Microphone. Thank you. It's working. Fantastic. Thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the introduction, Shoshana. Today is midsummer, and I couldn't imagine any better opportunity to be here at the Energy Day of a country which has one of the highest solar potentials in Europe, Romania. Before I'm answering the questions you just had, let me take the opportunity, as we still have Mr. Boucher and Mr. Murashan here with us, to comment a little bit on what you said. Because today we're not talking we're not talking about any green ideas anymore. We're really talking about business when we talk about renewables, and that's what both of you mentioned. So we're talking about business because it's the cheapest energy source together with wind. Today, solar is the cheapest energy source. And I was just recently at a panel discussing renewable hydrogen. And what became very clear from the discussions is that today, first businesses are already relocating to countries, to regions where they have abundant renewable electricity because it's the cheapest. And they also have some ESG commitments to fulfill. So renewable electricity and the availability of renewable electricity very much becomes a discussion of business location, of attracting investments to countries, and not about becoming green, tackling climate change as one of the first elements to be discussed. So investments, attracting investments to countries. Second, we're also talking about freedom energy, and that has also become clear from your interventions, from your keynotes. Just to give you a number, with the solar strategy, and thanks very much to the European Commission of proposing an excellent Repower EU and an excellent solar strategy, the ambitions have been raised. So with all of the measures and the ambitions which have been proposed, we are going towards 1 terawatt of solar installed in Europe by 2030. 1 terawatt of solar, that's what we have installed globally today. This year, we installed 1 terawatt of solar globally. In 2030, we can have 1 terawatt of solar installed in Europe. And just to give you a little bit of a reference, that corresponds roundabout to 117 BCM of gas, and those who are in the details know that we are importing 150 BCM from Russia today. So solar could almost cover that amount. And last, we had a day of national strike in Belgium yesterday. Today, the whole UK is striking, and many other countries are striking as well because people see their purchasing power being reduced. So the third point I want to make is that it is also about avoiding social unrest, and it's about affordable energy bills. And you talked about the energy powerhouse. Solar, by the way, is also not just cheap, it's also the job powerhouse. And referring to Romania, Romania could have the 6th position in terms of job creation by 2025, providing 45,000 jobs to Romania. So what do we need before, Mr. Boucher, you're leaving? You have been mentioning the 45% renewables. We're very grateful for the parliament to support 45% renewables, and that's referring very much to the speed you have also mentioned, Susanna. I would really hope that you can also convince member states about the 45% renewables. I do know that the parliament has a very, very forceful negotiating power. That's what we need. We need to have speed. We need to have higher renewables target. And we're very grateful for the support we have in the European Parliament very broadly. So to your points, supply chains. Yes, we need to diversify. We still are very strong in Europe when it comes to, for example, inverters. You mentioned it already, where we still have some global players in Europe. But when you look at the supply chains, and we're very strong on the raw material side, polysilicon, We have one global player in Germany, for example. But it's clear that some elements of the supply chain are not strong enough to support the demand we're looking at. And the demand we're looking at, by the way, is as of 2025, we could see more than 100 gigawatt of solar installed in Europe. So it's huge. And we hope that parts of it will be also in Romania. We hope to see that the capacity doubled in Romania by 2025 at least. I think we're now at 1.5 gigawatt. But coming back to the supply chains, so we need to have supply chains also in Europe. There's a great opportunity because we have the know-how in Europe. We just need to scale up the innovative technologies that European research institutes have been inventing. And we need to bring that to the ground, scale it up in Europe. We need gigawatt factories here along the whole supply chain. And we're in a perfect position with the huge demand we have in Europe and with the technologies we have in Europe. It needs investment decisions, and I'm happy to have the EIB here on the panel as well, because I do see a very important role for the EIB, apart from the European funds you mentioned as well. Great to see Romania also taking advantage already of the Recovery and Resilience Plan and the money thereof. The Commission needs to help us with the Innovation Fund, that parts of the Innovation Fund go into PV manufacturing, because indeed it's about diversifying, being able to have some of the autonomy we need. I'm not talking about reshoring everything, but we need autonomy in Europe, and we need to make that happen, scale up very fast, and we need all hands on deck for that. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, gigawatt, yes, I mean, Romania is very strong on rooftops. It would be great to also see more utility scale in Romania. You've been mentioning some of the lands that could be used for having large utility scale solar parks. What we need to do is to avoid a discussion where we are competing for land. But there's so much land which is available, and obviously rooftops is the very first thing which is unused, but there's so much land which is available and which can be used for solar production and which should be used for solar production. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it is indeed impressive to look at Romania's solar potential, and equally so, it's very interesting to see that it's a country with huge potential in wind as well. And I referred in my introductory sort of context framing for this panel to the idea of Romania becoming a clean energy powerhouse for Europe. But that wouldn't be necessarily Romania on its own. So let's say Romania with the region. And when I think of countries around Romania, for example, Moldova and even Ukraine, there's also very good wind there. So can we expect something big in terms of a development in that region to actually emerge from the Black Sea area, and obviously that would include Bulgaria, and so can we see a regional development in that sense? So maybe that's a question for Giles, and it's only a question in addition to the primary question, which is how fast can things develop to help us get to where we need to get, and even beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So wind energy is 15% of all of the electricity that we consume in Europe today. By 2050, the European Union wants that to be 50%, one half of all the electricity we consume. By 2030 alone, the EU wants wind energy capacity to grow from 190 gigawatts of wind farms, which is what we have today, most of it onshore, to 510 gigawatts by 2030, still most of it onshore. In Romania today, you have 3 gigawatts of onshore wind farms, but they are already producing 11% of all of the electricity that you consume. And there's huge potential to grow that number more. You have great space, great wind speeds, and crucially, it makes economic sense. Wind power is cheap, as we have heard. It creates jobs locally in the installation, operation, and maintenance of wind farms, and it creates jobs in the supply chain. And Romania may have relatively less wind energy than other countries in Europe today, but you already have your fair share of supply chain activity. Schaeffler are making bearings, for example, in Brasov. Elektroputera are making transformers in Craiova. Energobit are making electrical equipment in Cluj. The more wind farms you build, the more you'll be able to build out your wind energy supply chain. We had an event, Valburga and I, together with the Romanian wind and solar power associations and wind and solar power associations across the whole of the Southeast Europe region in Bucharest last month, where we were focusing on this very issue. How can the expansion of renewables in Southeast Europe, where there's such good potential for wind and solar, drive the creation of jobs and growth in the region as well? And it was a very successful event. Many of you were there. Mr. Murashan, you talked about the importance of getting the finance right. Absolutely right. And in fact, Romania is doing a pretty good job. As you said, you are now spending your recovery and resilience money specifically on capital grants for new wind and solar projects. And we look forward to the results of this competitive tender that closes tomorrow. It's nearly 1 billion euros worth that is available for around 400 or 500 megawatts of wind and solar that can be built very quickly. Then later this year, you're running another competition to spend your modernization fund money on wind and solar. And then early next year, you will run your first contract for difference auction for new onshore wind. And this is a really good step forward, because when you do contract for difference or CFD auctions, you provide stable revenues. The government gets paid back when the prices are high, and it pays out when the prices are low. That gives stable revenues to those building the wind farms. It enables them to borrow money from the banks at cheap rates. It keeps the finance costs low. And at a time when interest rates are about to start rising again, that is very important. Something else, again, Romania is getting right. Well done. Now, let's look at the wider European picture and Repower EU. One of the most important elements of Repower EU is not the possible higher new renewable energy target. It's not the new volumes. It's the recognition that you will only achieve these higher volumes if you simplify the permitting of new wind and solar. And this is the biggest bottleneck today, the expansion of renewables. And the Commission has got it absolutely right, your proposals on the simplification of permitting. You've given 8 pages of very clear recommendations to member states on how they can simplify their permitting rules and procedures. You've given them 45 pages of good practice. What is the way to do this most effectively? Drawing on the good practice on different aspects of permitting from different member states. And you've tabled some legal proposals to change the Renewable Energy Directive that will force member states to speed up their permitting. Well done. Absolutely right. 2 other observations. Let's not forget the human side of this. We have 300,000 people working in wind energy across Europe today. That number should be 450,000 by 2030. But we're struggling today to find those additional 150,000 people. It's the same in every industrial sector. Europe hasn't got enough engineers and technicians. Now, actually, in Romania, you have a resource which you're starting to use now to great effect, which is the thousands of people who work in the coal mining industry. And you are the only country in Europe that is now actively reskilling and retraining your coal miners to work in renewable energy. We have 2 training centers up and running now in Romania, where we're taking coal miners. In fact, the coal mining companies are knocking at the door of these training centers saying, please offer a long-term future to these workers. It takes us 3 months to reskill a coal miner to work in a wind farm. They have good technical skills already, and they're used to working in fairly arduous physical conditions. So well done to you, Romania. The Romanian government has been putting money into these training schools hitherto. We're now asking the European Commission to put your money under the Just Transition Fund into these measures as well. And my final observation, next Monday, Mr. Niculescu, you have a great opportunity to help accelerate all of this when the energy ministers meet at the Energy Council in Luxembourg. On the table before you will be the Commission's proposals to change the rules on permitting. You can agree to those proposals, and that will help to give us real momentum on the acceleration of simplified permitting that we need to deliver this ambition for 2030.
Thank you very much, Giles, and thank you also to referring to others in the room, because of course what's so lovely about Romanian Energy Days is that thanks to the Romanian Energy Center, there's an actual community that has been created here in Brussels, but also of course with links to Romania around these topics, and it's very nice to have you join us in this edition as well, so thank you. You have referred to the European Commission several times, and so I would like to actually invite Mrs. Yolanda Garcia Mesquita to respond to also what Walburga has said and to the keynote speeches. You are working in the Unit for Policy Coordination and Planning, so I'm just very curious to hear how does it all look like from the side of trying to coordinate the plannings. The plans.
Thank you very much. I think it's not an easy question, and on top, I have a huge responsibility after the reference from the previous speaker. So I want to first, as we mentioned, the need for investments. And I think this is very important, and this is what the European Commission has been working the last months to ensure that we have framework that stimulate, incentivize investments. And this is extremely important. So since October last year, we experienced these high energy prices, and then we discovered how exposed we are to the international prices. And if we have already set in the direction of travel, that is the European Green Deal, the climate law, with the decarbonization of Europe, and with this intermediate target by 2030, with the famous 55%, we reconfirm that this is the direction of travel when we see how exposed we were to the high gas prices fixed in the international markets and the repercussions immediately in the electricity market. So we all in our countries experience the pressure after 2 years of pandemic, so starting the economic recovery, how was the impact in vulnerable consumers and of course in industries that they were competing in international markets with high energy prices. So this reconfirmed that the direction of travel is clear to invest in more renewables, to reduce the exposure and to be more independent from the external sources and to be less exposed, as Mr. Boucher mentioned, to be in the hands of this geopolitical context and to use energy as a weapon. So it's clear that to develop renewables in Europe, and I put in the picture energy efficiency, which is extremely important because the energy that is the most or the cheapest and the cleanest is the energy that we don't consume. So this was already incorporated in all the actions that the European Commission tabled in the Fit for 55 proposal in July and December 2021. So the direction of travel was clear, invest in renewables and energy efficiency, but we saw the context change completely in February with when Russia with invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So this was a reconfirmation that we're in the right direction, and of course to have table a strategic plan with clear commitment, clear targets in order to ensure that this could materialize at the end of the day in more renewables in Europe and more energy efficiency. To say like that means like it could be easy, but of course it's not, because it means like you have to be 27 realities. Was mentioned as well the different specificities at national level and regional level should be taken into consideration. So with this in mind, we prepare the Repower Plan adopted in 18 May with concrete targets in solar, identify elements that they are essential in order to deploy renewables, permitting. Sometimes it's not a question of financing because there is a willingness to invest, but we have 5-10 years in order to get permittings. This is unacceptable. If we want to get the targets that we really need to achieve, we really need to accelerate permittings. So to put in the basket investment is key. So we need to stimulate private investments. Public investments are going in this direction as well, but we need to as well put in place reforms. Sometimes we underestimate the powerful of the reforms in order to facilitate the deployment of investments that we really need. So this is what we have put in place. And of course, guidance is always welcome and important, but sometimes we need to be more, let's say, to enforce. And this is what we try to do with the Fit for 55, and given the new context, to increase the targets, as Mr. Boucher mentioned, was already the Parliament asking for increased targets in both renewables and energy efficiency. Why? Because 1 year after, so compared to July 2021, the scenario is different. It's like that. We need to enhance our targets. Unfortunately, they are not sufficient, what we table in 2021. So we need to increase these targets, and we need, of course, to ensure that we as well be more independent, but this is going to revert in Europe, in the industrial leadership. And it's something that we realize how important it is to ensure that the value chain can remain in Europe, and to develop as well the capacities, the skills, as has been mentioned as well. This is very important. We need to ensure that this is aligned in this deployment of renewables that we need. So with this in mind, and of course, I don't mention how important it is to create growth and employment, because it has been mentioned several times, and I think it's completely key. What is now the next steps? The next step, as Susanna mentioned, is to put this into practice. We need to implement. We need to put this wonderful plan at EU level to put it at national level. What are the tools that we have? So the tools we know, the National Energy and Climate Plans is already the first plans were already submitted in 2019. The Commission gave recommendations that were oriented to be more ambitious, in the case of Romania, to be more ambitious in the deployment of renewables energy efficiency. So it was already identified that the plan was fine, but still more ambitious should be done in the plan. In particular, because Romania is highly dependent on fossil fuels. So this is important as well to decarbonize the economy. So electrification is a good example with a high penetration of renewables, but we need to pay attention to the transport. We need to decarbonize transport sector, industry, buildings. So it's a huge effort that Romania has to do. It's in the right direction, but we need to be more ambitious that we table in 2019. Was mentioned as well, the Recovery and Resilience Plan has been a huge effort by all member states in Europe, thanks to the EU money that was much needed in order to recover from the COVID-19. So Romania is a good example because it mobilized is around 14 billion in loans, 14 billion in grants, that was mentioned as well from the previous speaker. So this is the Recovery and Resilience Plan for Romania, and important because it was more than 37%, which was the objective, 40%. So it was much more ambitious that the Recovery and Resilience Facility regulation to allocate in climate change objectives. So it was really ambitious, and in particular include something that was very important, to phase out coal in the production of electricity by 2030. This is important because for first time was a clear direction in order to phase out coal and to replace by renewables during this way. So I think this was very important. I don't want to forget the European semester and the country-specific recommendation that is an annual exercise that this year was published by the Commission in May. And here we highlight how dependent is Romania in fossil fuels. This is one area what should be improved. And of course, important to deploy renewables, and important as well to facilitate energy efficiency. Building renovation is one area important, and to enhance interconnections. Why? Because this is very important in order to achieve the ambitious targets that we have in front of us in the most efficient way. We are in an integrated process to work with the neighbors, will ensure that we can achieve the targets at least cost possible. And this is important because we need to pay for it. So I'm going to go to conclude. Financing was mentioned. So I think the only that I'm going to recall is what is in the Repower EU plan. So it's around 200 billion more that we need in order to achieve the phase out of Russian fossil fuels by 2027. So these 200 billion, in addition to what was already estimated in order to implement Fit for 55, how we can mobilize this money. In particular, we have European funds. Of course, the budget is limited. And what was mentioned is the loans that were not expended, so around 200 billions that we are going to encourage member states to take the part of loans that was not taken during the recovery and resilience facility when we were preparing the plans. Of course, an important element is the flexibility that we provide to the member state to transfer on voluntary basis part of the funds of the cohesion fund or the agriculture towards the recovery and resilience plans. And here an important element, there is a new chapter that is called Repower EU in the recovery and resilience plan. So this possibility to amend the plans has been mentioned, but now there is going to be a specific chapter in order to include investments and reforms to accelerate the transformation and, of course, to diversify our energy sources in this context that is not the context that we had in 2020. Just to conclude, because I think it's time, the implementation, as I mentioned, we are working hard with the member state and with close cooperation with the member state, including with Romania, of course, in order to facilitate the implementation and to put into concrete actions what is in the recovery and the Repower EU plan. There is going to be, we are going to table guidance for the preparation of the national energy and climate plans, because the plans in 2019, of course, is not updated compared to this situation. So the guidance are going to be tabled around October with the State of the Energy Union, that you know is the annual exercise in October. We are going to publish guidance where we are going to include the new targets that we have in front of us: renewables, greenhouse gases, energy efficiency, and of course, this need to diversify our energy sources, taking into account the geopolitical context that we are. Another important element, of course, was mentioned as well. We encourage member states and the parliament to accelerate and to conclude the interinstitutional negotiation, Energy Efficiency Directive, Renewable Energy Directive, and of course, Energy Performance Buildings Directive, that they have included in this last minute in Repower EU more ambitious provisions related to the context that we are. So we really encourage the countries to really accelerate and to put really and to conclude the negotiation, and then we'll go, of course, immediately to the implementation, and we will help member states taking into account national and regional specificities and the flexibility provided in the legislation to ensure that all this legislative provision is not paper, is developed in concrete action. So I think I will stop here, but we have plenty of elements that we can continue discussing.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for the rich set of recommendations that you've shared with us, and also by giving us a bit of a taste of what's to come in the autumn. That's really useful for everyone here, so that we can also, it's nice to have some certainties in this pretty volatile world. So the one word, I take away many recommendations, but the one word that I've heard you say the most was actually ambitious, and it's a word I like a lot. And I think ambition is a muscle that we need in the Romanian energy community to be flexing a bit more often, to become sort of the engine of our vision for the future. So thank you very much for that. And I would like to actually ask Mr. Andrei Safar, also maybe bridging a little bit from the notion of ambition. You are representing CEZ Romania, and you've had long-standing projects in Romania in terms of renewables. And I'm curious, what would you feel would help you, let's say, accelerate your ambition in the country, or including what might have hampered your ambition in the past? If you could maybe share with us, and of course we are in a rush with this panel, I apologize, but conciseness is still very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be in this conference. I have to say, I'm kind of feeling like being the one who is destroying the party, because I really heard so many positive things. I'm really sorry that Alessio was not talking before me, because maybe he will take that role. We are talking about the future. We are talking about challenges for the future, but we are talking about something which is very positive. This is really bright. when we talk, when we are talking about Romania, so like in general about the renewables, you need to have natural resources. So you need to have a potential, you need to have a sun, you need to have a wind, and Romania has that. The other thing which is important is to have infrastructure in place. So you need to have the networks, you need to have a market, and you need to have costs of operation somehow reasonable, and you need to have a people which are able to make it. When it comes natural resources, this is given. The rest is something which is in our hands to develop it, and there is something where we really need to work a lot. So we are talking about the future. We are talking about the transition through the investments into renewables, into energy efficiency, into the networks. But as well, we are having a large list from the history of unsolved problems, which are really blocking us in order to build that future. Starting sometime from summer, us as a sector, and we are organized in various associations, we spent pretty much days and nights with the representative of the administrations to really find the solutions about how to overcome the situation with the increasing energy prices and how to build the future. But all the discussions always ended up on the historical issues. So what we are addressing are far more historical issues than the challenges of the future. So what we have now in the daily life. So we are discussing increase of customers of the gas instead of discussing about electrification, instead of discussing about how the future will look like. So we want to extend the gas network. This is one of the priority, and the legislation, all the discussion of the legislation is about an increasing number of customers of something which is supposed to be transition. We are talking about energy efficiency, but we have more than 90% are paying price of the energy which was valid 2 years ago. And those customers believe that the price of energy is expensive because they see it every day in the TV. But their real bills are the electricity and price of 2 years ago. So we want customers to be energy efficient, but we don't have the courage to tell them what's the real price. They are not motivated because they are not economically motivated to be energy efficient. So what is happening across the Europe, where all the industries, even all the customers are looking for solutions, how to be energy independent, how to be energy efficient. We don't have it that much in Romania because people are saying, why? It's not economical. It doesn't make sense for me because the return on the investment doesn't make sense because I'm paying the price of 2 years ago. As well, we are talking about qualified personnel. We are now in the situation where all the distribution companies, because of the financial stress, which we are not able to address, we are slowing down the investments. So we have, and some of the partners are sitting here as well. They are now discussing, and they are really struggling to keep the employment. There is going to be most likely very soon, it will be the moment when there is going to be boom in renewables, but our suppliers might not make it with all the qualified personnel because we are not giving the works to them, which we were doing 1 year ago, because we are just not having enough money for the investments. We are going to receive them sometime in future. So we have the system, which is going to tell us, which is giving us those money sometime in future, but we need them now. We don't need them sometime in future. So how to overcome it? Because that's something which I see as the most important. So we need to really invest into distribution network and transmission network. Because the network as they are now, they are not prepared for all of this new generation, for all of these renewables. And we need to prepare those networks. And this we need to do now because we cannot do it 3 years later when those renewables will be there. We need to as well develop the market to have liquidity on the market, because if you are struggling with something as a renewables is to really sell the energy, to be able on daily basis. If there are no CFDs, if there are CFDs, it's perfect for the future. If not, we can manage as investors, but we need to be able to sell. Every day we should be able to sell the energy, not that this is transactions are happening once per time. So there should be a real liquid market. If you look on the Western markets, there is a liquidity. You can sell every day. We don't have it in our region. It's not only Romania, it's the regional thing. We as well, we need to get the courage to say to population, to say to industry, what's the real value? What's the real price of energy? I'm not saying that they have to pay it, because it's sure that there are groups of customers which have to be supported. So it should be something which is sensible, but they need to understand what's the value. And we need to use maybe that time when they are supported for the customers to really invest and be prepared for that future. Because if you don't have the courage now, when they are protected, they will be shocked the same way as they would be shocked today with the real prices. They will be shocked in 1 year. So we need to use this 1 year of protection for pretty much all the customers to make them really invest and be less sensitive and be less in risk once this is going to end. Another thing which is related to our renewables, because more renewables means more imbalances, we have more expensive imbalances cost. We need to answer to ourselves why. Because Romania is not worse when it comes to potential for imbalances. We have in Romania a lot of hydropower plants. We have mountains. We have gas-fired power plants. We have coal-fired power plants. When it comes to really the potential, we are not worse than Hungary. We are not worse than Czech Republic. We are not worse than Bulgaria, for example, when it comes to potential. But why is it in Romania most expensive? Honestly, I don't know. There are a lot of ideas. There are a lot of theories. But there are reasons. There are reasons why is it in Romania, why is it not in any other country, where the structure is of the generation is very similar. So there should be something which is able to address it, because it is something which is really driving the value of the generation from renewables. It's driving it down compared to other countries. And that's the last thing which we have to do as Romania. We don't like it, but we are in competition with all the other EU countries. We have to answer to ourselves why someone should come to invest in Romania and not to any other country. Because at the end, it's really competition from the perspective of investors.
Thank you very much. And if you allow me, I will propose just a change in the order of the panel, because I'd like to actually get Alessio's commentary at this stage, and I'd like to see how it actually mirrors or parallels your own, so that way we get sort of a full picture, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrei. Do you hear me? Yes. Okay. So, to go further, I want to make a step backwards. And to give a little bit of context. And again, thank you, Andrei, because I have to invent something now, because you said everything and I don't want to repeat. I'm joking, of course. So when the European Union decided to go full renewable, we saw, and there are many commentators that are discussing this, and I tend to agree with them. We saw this very strong attack from Russia, that it's not on Ukraine, it's on the European Union. It's a clear fact now, or at least I agree with the commentators that are having this kind of vision. And one can think that, well, at the moment in which the European Union started to think, okay, we want to be independent from the Russian gas, this move started, okay, and it was extremely painful, and it's painful, of course, for the Ukrainian population, but it's also painful for the European consumers all over the place. And this creates confusion, social turmoil. And we really have to think about this dot connecting thing. So, and again, to give a little bit of context. So we know for a fact that gas, Russian gas, and the company that are dealing with Russian gas are, at the end of the day, a strong political, external, foreign political tool of the Russian state. So it's very centralized, it's very oligarchic driven. And now we are speaking about to decrease the independence from Russian gas. I would rather prefer to have, of course, we need to be independent from Russian gas as soon as possible. The next best thing is to be independent from gas, full stop. Not from Russian gas, from gas, full stop. Because we are going to create a vulnerability with other states that are, many of them, they do not share our values, okay? And we are creating a dependence from other states that we are going to face in the future. So now, arriving at today, the decision to go full renewables was the best decision that the European Union took in the last, I think, 30, 40 years. Because it's a social decision, it's an economic decision, it's a value decision. Okay. Now, if we go and look at the current Romanian situation, the discussion about renewables and value is not very well declined. The discussion about energy in Romania is 80% gas, 20% other stuff. If renewables and this big discussion about what we need to do in the future is between the others, of course, you don't have the time, the space, and the policies, and the policy implementation, and the conversation to implement a full relevant energy transition that is in the benefit of the end consumers. I also understand that the gas companies are trying to defend themselves. Last year, we were discussing that the oil and gas are not anymore the super majors. The utilities, renewable companies, were the new super majors. I understand that gas company wants to defend themselves, wants to keep their, they need to survive, okay? It's absolutely clear. But not at the cost of the general population. And one of the most relevant things of the package and the ideas that the European Union is putting forward is also that the way in which business is working is completely different. Someone of you mentioned ESG. So we strongly believe that electrification will empower local communities that will produce their own energy, and they will have, by this, more power in the market as consumers, more adaptability, more flexibility. They will be more smart, they will be smarter, they will be more adaptable, and they will, at the end of the day, improve their well-being. This conversation, unfortunately, in Romania still not happens. And it's a pity, because at the end of the day, someone said the Romanian Energy Center created a community, and it's right, it's a community. And when we gather together, it doesn't matter if you are a private company or a representative of the state, we have a conversation, but at the end of the day, something happens. And this it's not anymore bearable for a country that, again, has to prove herself in comparison with other countries that attract investment in a more easy way. So Romania is in the fortunate or unfortunate situation in which they have to do something a little bit more compared to other countries, because otherwise people will not come to invest. I will close here. Before I want to make I want to mention something. Of course, one other aspect that is creating a difficult situation in increasing and improving the investment in Romania is how we perceived in the last period the Romanian state to behave. I mentioned Russian companies at the beginning. State-owned companies driving political decision, controlling, as Andrei was saying, reference prices, etc., etc. I really hope that the Romanian authorities do not pursue this route. It's a wrong route. It's a short-term route, and it will not bring any kind of benefit to the end consumer, not to the companies. We don't care. So we will have jobs. We will do something else. We will transform ourselves. This is not the best decision for the end consumer and for the Romanian citizen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now be very curious to hear from the side of the EIB. We've talked a lot about investments. Effectively, that's been the second most popular word on this panel. And so just very curious from your side how this looks, and to what extent have you worked with Romania on projects, or what can we borrow from other projects you've looked at, or other investment frameworks of the bank? What can we actually apply in the Romanian context? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And well, first of all, thank you to the organizers for having invited the EIB. The European Investment Bank, first of all, welcomes REPowerEU and the objective of phasing out our dependence on Russian fossil fuels as soon as possible, as well as the objective to increase the resilience of the EU energy system. We believe, I think many of us, or all of us in this room, that the long-term solution to gas security of supply is to reduce gas demand through investments in renewable electricity and heat, as well as through increasing energy efficiency measures in existing buildings and industry. Electricity networks and interconnectivity also need to be reinforced in order to enhance the flexibility of the EU energy system and to better face future shocks like the one we are experiencing now with the Ukrainian crisis. We believe that we already have a solid foundation to build on, which is the European Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package. And of course, accelerating their implementation will not only help address the climate and environmental crisis, but as well to meet the REPowerEU objectives. The EIB group remains fully committed to our climate action and environmental sustainability commitments and to their delivery to support the implementation of the European Green Deal. And in fact, accelerating the transition through green finance is one of the main pillars of our climate bank roadmap, which we already approved in November 2020. And we have a goal to support 1 trillion of green investments until 2030. So we believe that we can make a significant contribution to REPowerEU objectives. In fact, since we approved our energy lending policy in 2019, the focus of our support in the energy sector has been to no-regret sectors, so to renewable energy, to energy efficiency, and to the network, to electricity networks. Over the last 5 years, in fact, we have dedicated more than 90% of our financing to these subsectors within energy, and this is how we are supporting security of supply. In the case of Romania, since we started operations in the country, we have provided over 1.1 billion euros in financing to the energy sector, and 44% of this financing has been dedicated to energy efficiency, followed by renewable energy with an 18% share of our financing to Romania in energy, then 17% for electricity grids. And in fact, we have supported projects, both with NL and CHES. So, and as it says in the REPowerEU communication, the EIB group, we are ready to work closely with the European Commission, with member states, so with Romania, of course, and with other implementing partners in a Team Europe approach to accelerate the lending, blending, and advisory products for renewables, for energy efficiency, and for electricity networks. We are in the process right now internally of discussing what this means in practice, because of course we are aware that, I mean, even though we were already working on how to accelerate the energy transition in the new circumstances, we are trying to see how we can even reinforce or step up this acceleration. So this is something we are discussing internally. We already have discussed some measures on how to improve support to energy efficiency. And I mean, essentially it consists of trying to approach new clients, to give some priority internally to investments in the energy sector where we see there would be more impact, and also streamlining some of our internal procedures so that we can speed up the due diligence of projects. This is something we did with the recovery already, with the COVID projects, let's say. So this is something we are looking at. And also as well to see whether we need to develop new instruments or to build on existing financing instruments, on InvestEU, etc. This is something we are assessing at the moment. For Romania, well, it has been said already, no, but according to Irina, it has the largest technical potential in the Southeastern Europe region for utility scale solar PV, wind and hydropower. And we have seen an increase in the share of renewables in the past, and it has committed to the targets under the NECP. So of course, this is very important for investors to have predictability and a stable regulatory framework. And as it has been said already, we also think that the permitting guidance and all the measures that the Commission has put in place will definitely help, because this is something we have seen, I mean, not only in Romania and many other projects, but it's one of the bottlenecks we have seen for the development of renewable energy projects. I want to briefly mention energy efficiency. Because despite Romania's relatively low energy consumption per capita, we also believe that there is a lot of potential on energy efficiency interventions, and the area that offers most quick wins and more wins is the renovation of existing buildings. Due to the low energy performance of the existing building stock. This is something we have supported in the past, and we are, of course, ready to continue supporting. And indeed, we believe that in the short to medium term, in order to address the urgent needs of REPowerEU, the investments that will give the answer to this in the short to medium term, it's definitely energy efficiency, and on renewables, the well-proven technologies. Then if we look more longer term, of course, it's innovation, hydrogen, etc. So just to conclude, we are of course ready to continue working with the Romanian energy sector and with other partners to support the implementation of REPowerEU and the European Green Deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And many things are shifting and changing, and I realize we're running out of time, but I do want to actually ask you a question, which is just with regards, since we're in the process of responding in crisis mode at the European level. I'm curious to know whether the EIB is considering revisiting its lending criteria. And if not, if you could please share with us by what year is the bank going to stop financing fossil fuel projects? Thank you.
Well, in fact, we already phased out our financing to fossil fuels. I mean, there were some, we could still support PCIs that were in the fourth PCI list but they had to be approved by our board by the end of 2021. So this period has ended. We can still support very efficient cogeneration projects, and we can support the gas sector, but when it comes to hydrogen-ready infrastructure. So So just to be clear on that we can still support the gas sector, but when it comes to investments that are targeting hydrogen. And then in terms of the review of our energy lending policy, of course, you are not the first one to ask, given the new circumstances. This is something at the moment we are not planning on changing it, but of course it's a question that, no, given the current situation, has been posed to us externally, and we have been thinking internally, but at the moment we are not planning on changing it.
That's very nice news. It's good to know some things remain stable, and especially given the normative power of the EIB around the world. So thank you so much. And now moving on to the last panelist. I'm really sorry, Bruce, that it's taken a while to get to you. Indeed, this panel in itself is a full conference. But so I would like to actually invite you, since you're the last speaker, to react to what you've heard. Of course, we've all referred to sort of the electricity infrastructure, to the market design. If there's anything you want to share, thoughts on that. Of course, Brussels is very consumed at the moment with discussions around possible electricity market design. We know this is actually happening in parallel in the UK, so it wouldn't be unexpected to see the EU accelerating such a process. So I would be curious to hear from you. And I actually have a question from Julian Popov for you. And he said he dared me to ask it, but how can we ensure greater representation from Central East European countries and companies at broader Eurelectric conferences? And maybe you don't need to answer that today, but perhaps at some point we'd like to see more representation. That's that was a part of the briefing for this session, that I should raise that for you. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. And it'll be a pleasure to answer that. And it's good to see two of our members here, both NL and chairs on the panel. First, maybe a couple of reflections on what's been presented so far and Eurelectric's take on it. So on the back of Repower EU, we launched a report last week called Game Changers. You can see it on our website. And we highlighted 5 huge challenges, and ambition is a word you used. It is ambitious. But we strongly support the Commission's proposal on Repower EU, but we see 5 areas that need significant action, and you'll find policy recommendations in that report. So first of all, and no surprise, is electrification. So electrify everything that can be electrified with clean and renewable power. That needs to be increased 1.7 times faster per year. And it's disappointing to see in the European Union that electrification has stagnated currently. Secondly, decarbonize faster. A lot has been said about that, but the acceleration of renewables and permitting in particular is crucial. Giles said targets are good, and we believe delivery is better. So we do need to deliver on that. And that is between 2 and 3 times faster that's required. Thirdly, strengthen the grids. A lot has been said about that, but investment in grids, in interconnectors, and there the investments need to increase by 1.4 times annually. Fourthly, to protect customers, specifically vulnerable customers. And there's an opportunity to reduce or even remove ad hoc taxes and levies from those end consumer bills. 40% on average of the electricity bill is taxes and levies. And finally, to secure investments generally, and I'm delighted to follow on from EIB, but investments generally must increase, and globally they must increase from currently 1 trillion euros per year to 3 trillion euros per year. All that has to happen between now and 2030. Yeah, we see that as a challenge, but also a huge opportunity for Europe. Specifically on Romania, and I had a discussion with the ministry, but also today, pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Niculescu, about these 2 important points for the power sector. One is more concerning for us, is the extension of the windfall tax profits to March next year. We understand from the discussions we had with you that it's not a new investment, so it's on existing infrastructure, existing plants, that it's set at 80%, and it's only for 9 months till March next year. However, we're concerned that will have an impact on investor confidence, both in Romania, but potentially in other markets. And then finally, to finish on a very positive note for Romania, and Giles mentioned this in his speech, which is the introduction of CFDs next year. We see that as a significant step forward. I believe something like 1.5 gigawatts next year, and 2025, something like 2 gigawatts could be contracted. And that's a positive signal for you, but also for the region. I was in Sofia 2 weeks ago discussing with the Deputy Prime Minister about exactly that topic and how potentially Bulgaria could do the same. So, you know, it's a great leadership position you're taking in the region. And we'd be delighted to have more Eastern European and Southeast European speakers on the panel. In fact, we were delighted to have the Deputy Energy Minister from Ukraine and the CEO of DTEC, the Ukrainian utility, speaking at the event. But of course, we would welcome, and I now have the mobile number of Mr. Niculescu. We'll make sure that the ministry is invited personally to attend our event next year, which will be in Paris in March. Maybe to end on how you started, Susanna, which is about Romania being the powerhouse of Europe. We truly believe that, and our members do too. And it's the powerhouse not only for renewables, which, as you've seen, has huge potential, but also for business and for job creation. So I'll end there, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much to everyone, and I think this has been a long but extremely rich panel, and I think we're inspired and can leave the scene, the stage for the next panel. So thank you all for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Great job, and thank you to your speakers. We are not taking a break, even though you might think so, but we are getting to the end of our conference. But trust me, the next panel will be as interesting as the conference so far.
Hello, everybody. Tackle interesting topics from the perspective of the Romanian industry. I think we have heard in the previous sessions a lot about the connection between the ambitions of the European Union or the Commission and a sort of a pathway that it is recommended also for us. But I would start with a question basically for everybody in a sort of a let's say keyword that is given by the title reconversion, and I'm looking at let's say two panelists that are coming from the gas industry. I will pick up the theme on gas, and I would like to ask, I don't know if Livia is online already, but if not, Stefan, how do you practically see this reconversion, this transformation of the gas industry in the case of the plans of your company, or your personal thoughts in terms of accommodating maybe transitional, maybe in a sort of a combination with biogas, low carbon, or hydrogen, but specifically for Romania, if it's possible.
Thank you, Sorin. I will try to be short. Funcționează? That's fine. Thank you. So I will try to be short. Thank you, Sorin. I think it's important to see also the big picture of the energy transition. Energy is at the heart of a real industrial revolution, the fourth. The energy transition is the main vector for the transformation of our societies. So this is an important issue not only for our industries, but also for states and societies. I would say that energy represents today the main vector of the European integration. It's very political. The EU countries that will miss this transformation will find themselves in the second speed of the European integration. And this is a danger for Romania, of course, and also for our companies, because we must see that we are subsidiary companies in Romania, the big investors on the energy market in Romania, with economic but also political consequences. You see that European industrial partnerships have a political connotation. We are talking about the battery alliance, hydrogen alliance. Alliance is a very political term. We don't need to create a multi-speed Europe to change the European treaty, the Treaty of Lisbon, for example. We sign industrial agreement and we create the multi-speed Europe. For Romania, succeeding in this energy transition is a strategic objective, the chance to be part of a European process of qualitative transformation of our economy. In this process, ENGIE is ready to do its part as one of the major players on the Romanian energy market. For our foreign friends, we are the largest distributor and supplier, gas distributor and gas supplier, operating in 20 counties, including the capital Bucharest. We are also a significant player in the renewables. We produce 120 megawatts of electricity from wind and solar. The context is, however, very difficult to transform our activities on the Romanian market, with the crisis caused by the rise of the energy prices and, of course, the pressure to find alternative supply to Russia. But I would like to remind you that ENGIE has supported the development of Black Sea gas resources from the beginning. We have signed an agreement in Paris with BCOG, Black Sea and Oil Gas Company. And thanks to this agreement, 1 billion cubic meters of gas will be available on the Romanian market. I think this agreement was very important for the decision of BCOG to start the exploration and all the investments in Black Sea. It is a commitment to Romanian energy security. This crisis requires us to demonstrate solidarity between industry and states. We fully understand this. However, we need big investments, and the investments requires financial support, but we're facing an acute shortage of funds. We as energy suppliers can no longer pre-finance all support measure taken by the government in order to limit the rise of energy prices for the consumers. In the same time, the increase in inflation was covered at the expense of the utility companies, and the financial sustainability of those companies is severely affected. Returning to ENGIE's specific goals of transformation, we believe in the necessity to modernize the natural gas distribution network. We think because of our unique role in the distribution of energy consumers, gas DSOs are very well positioned today to tackle urgent issues such as the energy transition and the energy independence of Romania. We share with the EU Commission its assessment of the REPowerEU action plan and what ENGIE saw as the next priority action to rapidly scale up the injection of renewable gases into the grids. Of course, considering the different start point of each European countries. Translate the target of 35 BCM biomethane into legally binding objective for member states that should be further reflected in the national energy and climate plans. The biomethane is a very important issue for us. You know, of course, we have the France model when the agriculture, the farmers are, and also the municipalities, because the huge potential of organic waste, they are very important players of energy sector. With all the benefits, not only in cogeneration, injection into the grid, the bio-CNG for green mobility, but also for natural fertilizer. It's another big issue for the European resilience. And we talk about circular economy also. And of course, align key prices of pieces of EU energy policies, renewable energy directive, gas package with the REPowerEU strategy to rapidly scale up production and injection of biomethane and hydrogen. Internally, on our national level, we need to accelerate the drafting of specific legislation for biomethane and hydrogen, including the introduction of support scheme. ENGIE Romanian's objective, and we welcome the creation of a parliamentary group in order to have a law dedicated till 2024 specifically to the renewable gases. It's important to have all the renewable gases, not only the hydrogen, because Romania has a potential also for biomethane, but also for carbon capture and also synthesis gases. And it's an important tool also to boost a little bit our R&D sector. And of course, ENGIE Romanian's objective also concerned the development of photovoltaic and wind energy production capacity, where it's also involved, as I said, in green mobility. And my last remark, because it's very important, and I want to congratulate the Romanian Center of Energy to organize here in Brussels. It's very important to be here, to be heard in Brussels, and to try to be more present in Brussels in the EU debates, together with 6 major DSOs companies, Italgas from Italy, GNI from Ireland, GRDF of France, Gulp from Portugal and Nedia from Spain, we put the basis of an European association based in Brussels, Gas Distributors for Sustainability, GD4S, in order to share our best practices, to be honest, to learn as Romanians, especially from their practices, but also to be in the center of the European debates and to participate, to have a dialogue, a serious dialogue with the European institution.
So I hear that renewable gas has a future.
Yes.
And thank you, Stefan, for that. But you also mentioned a couple of times politics in your
energy is politics.
In your speech. Then I would turn to Mr. Popa for his thoughts on the fact, and I would try to frame it like this. I think it's logical that renewable gas has a future, but Stefan also mentioned the new gas from Black Sea. We do have quantities coming from there. We will await or see how the development of the Neptune Deep evolves. From your perspective, we have like a short-term objective of security of supply, and this is gas. But we also have as a future avenue renewable gas, which also needs incentives and support. But what about passing through 2030? These type of developments in Black Sea or in any onshore, they will take time, like 20 or 25 years. There is a taxation. There are several like delegated act in terms of taxonomy. So for classical gas, there will be hurdles. What's your opinion on that?
Thank you, Mr. Isay. It's a panel dedicated to reconversion, and I'm not so sure if I understood very well the topics that already has been here since this morning, because as we all know, in Romania, we have different topics when we talk about the energy sector and the energy industry. And when I say this, I mean, because I see some faces that are not quite agree with me. We have quite dangerous problems that addressing the energy sectors. And I was wondering if these reconversions it's seeing from the Bucharest and the Brussels in the same way. When I see that, I remember we have to take out from the energy sector around 20% from the coal industry, and we have to do this by renewing the General Electric, the electric oven from Cioltenia, and we all know General Electric has already the production allocated for the next 5 years, and I was wondering if we can do that, because we all know the regulation of the public procurement law, and we are already beyond this target if we start calculating the dates. But in my point of view, the regulation and the target are not the main issue. And we, the politicians, should address. Now, the problem is to create a group of specialists, a veritable specialist, a framework that can work here in Brussels, because I agree with Mr. Popescu, the problems are here in Brussels, and we should be here. And when I say we should be here, I mean the Romanian government should be here, and the Romanian parliament should be here also, and the Romanian European parliamentary should work together in this group, because otherwise it will be very, very difficult for the Romanian energy industry to fulfill the targets that are coming from Brussels. And if you allow me, I will use this context to make a proposal And my proposal is quite courageous, if you allow me to say this. I will propose to the Romanian Prime Minister, Mr. Ciucă, to create a team of true specialists, an interministerial working group, energy, economic and finance, who will lead the great battles of energy and economic issue in favor of Romania here in Brussels. Because the most important games are here, and all the European countries have teams of multi-dimensional experts. The government and the parliament, the Romanian parliament, are called to take crisis measures. We need a multidisciplinary team of 10 well-trained specialists who understand the concept of economic patriotism, if you allow me to use this concept, and work here in Brussels for the benefit of the industry in Bucharest. There are some who are quite here in this room, but the government and the parliament must stop the dialogue of death and think seriously about Romania. Maybe it's risky to talk about patriotism today, but I'm telling you, the biggest trick of devil is to tell us that don't exist. Thank you.
No, it's clear that I think you mentioned that I think we should not ignore the elephant in the room in the sense that there is a different agenda. Nobody, I think, disputes or argues with that. But I would like to give a sort of a small comment or a short comment to your proposal about the interministerial working group and tell you that according to the governance regulation and NECP implementation, Romania should have had that already for 2 years. And we seem to not be able to gather this group of specialists, although it's a requirement. Even if it's a requirement, we are not able to put up this group.
I'm sorry, but I have to admit something. The recovery and resilience plan has, since a few days ago, the biggest secret of the Romanian since the Second World War. And now you, the companies from the energy, should work with this plan. This is a mistake that politicals should never repeat, because we talk about a country and it's very dangerous to talk like this.
Understood. But then let's take a sort of a step back, and Wesley, you are the guy with the money, in a sense. We are talking about priorities here. We all have let's say, agendas or the way in which we see things, and that's why it's good to agree that we disagree. But in a sense, coming from where you're coming and coming into Romania, what would you be able or be, in a sense, allowed to finance?
Thank you very much, Soren. And I think, I'm very grateful to be on the panel here today with people that have far more experience in Romanian energy industry than I do. I see two main themes here. There's existing actors that need more coordination and support, and new actors that need to come in to help increase the pace of the energy transition. And then the second main pillar or ingredient, I think it was Mr. Douglas in the previous panel highlighted, there's an extra 2 trillion a year that's needed to help with this transition. So we need, new and more new actors, better coordination amongst the actors, and a lot more money. Delphos International is a Washington, D.C. based boutique that's done transactions in 70 plus markets, raised over $20 billion over the past 35 years. We're a global firm. We see tremendous opportunity in Romania. We're working with the Romanian Energy Center to identify independent power producers and determine where there's funding gaps that we can come in and help fill. And we work across the capital structure and equity, debt, mezzanine financing. I'm pleased to hear that there's what shall we say, a river of funding coming from the European Union, but there's still always going to be the need for private sector capital. And we help work with private sector developers of independent power projects or along the supply chain, and identify how we can source private sector or official sources of capital. Oftentimes in power projects, the least cost of financing is coming from export credit agencies, which is become increasingly flexible in terms of their definition of domestic content. And so we can source extremely competitive financing through export credit agencies for the hardware and the equipment that needs to go into power projects. So we're finding that's an increasingly important segment of the business that we operate. And we look forward to rolling that out more broadly in Romania. And let's face it, the lower the cost of capital, then the lower the cost of delivered power at the end. So we see financing as a critical instrument, just not in enabling projects, but also in enabling a lower cost of energy and broader adoption and quicker transition. So we work with the private sector to help them get to bankability and get the lowest cost of capital. And we do that in a variety of ways, helping with their investor engagement, helping with them with the structure of the project, helping them advise them on their power purchase agreements to make sure that they can access different pools of liquidity that they might not otherwise be able to if there were some fundamental flaws or weren't some nuances in the agreement that we can help them guide them to conclusion on.
So basically, I hear that rivers of financing are flowing in a sense. I would like to turn to Mr. Pop here. It seems that we will have the money. From your experience, from your, let's say, market knowledge, do we have projects? Do we have mature projects in order to basically navigate this money flow?
So, Sorin, thank you for this question. Before starting, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today. And many thanks for Romanian Energy Center for all the job in order to organize such meeting. 11th session, it's already a history. And because we are in Brussels, please allow me to give some words in French. Monsieur le Président, pour la première fois en français, joyeux anniversaire. Cornelio, merci pour ton amitié et merci pour le fait de partager ce jour assez important pour toi avec nous. And now, switching back in English, I have to thanks also to Gilles, because in the previous sessions he mentioned the name of the company that I represent, Energobit. So I have to give some words about this company. So please see Energobit as a company which is active on the Romanian energy sector for more than 3 decades. We act as a general contractor for energy projects, but we also manufacture low voltage and medium voltage equipments, especially prefabricated medium voltage transformer substations or medium voltage switch gears. We are experts in electrical energy, and we are very focused on 3 activities, especially protections, SCADA, and metering, and also we have operation and maintenance of electrical installations. 2 hours ago, Frank, you mentioned that it's very difficult to have a session before the lunch break. As you can imagine, to have the last session is more difficult because a lot of things have been already raised, and it's very difficult to come with something new. So I will use this opportunity to make a summary of the whole day, but also to answer to your question. It was mentioned several times, what's the situation today in Romania on the renewable energy? And it was mentioned that in Romania we have already installed about 3,000 megawatts and in solar 1,400 megawatts. And I'm very proud to underline once again that the company that I represent, Energobit, was very, very active on the first wave of renewable energy, and we act as a BOP contractor or contractor for electrical works for more than 2,000 mega. So we have, I will say, we have a big experience on the Romanian market, and I have asked also the permission of Andrei Safar to share once again with you a picture that both of us we like very much. Unfortunately, I noticed that Andrei left the room. So this project where Andrei was very, very involved as the beneficiary of the project, but also my company was involved as the constructor of the project, is the largest onshore wind farm from Europe for 600 mega. So Romania, we have really very nice projects already done. Today, a lot of words about transition, about future, about changes. And I think that this picture represents exactly what has happened today in Europe and what has happened also in Romania. We are switching from a centralized situation to a distributed one. So large-scale generation, transmission network, and distribution, it's almost history. In a lot of countries now, it's a very complicated scheme. Still, large generation, it's ongoing, but more and more we have local generation, distributed generation, we have prosumers, everything is lit, we have storage, and it's more complicated. Are we ready for this? Are we already in the process? I will say yes. And starting to answer to your question, sorry, in Romania, we have a lot of ongoing projects. On this map, I have tried to underline only the projects where the company Energobit is involved for offering solution for the connection to the grid, for feasibility study and design. So not all those projects are already on the execution side, but I hope with your help, they will arrive on the execution side. But some of them, they are already on the execution side. And two remarks. On the previous slide, I mentioned that still on the distributed network, the large generation is important. And some projects here represent large generation. You are looking on the west side of the country, you will see one project, 1065 mega, which is a solar project, which is still the, let's say, the biggest solar project from Europe. Yes, it's on the paper, but once again, he will come on the real life. But you will see a lot of distributed projects all around the country, smaller or bigger, totalizing around 9,000 megawatts. Not all those projects will be realized, but once again, keep in mind that those projects are only the projects where the company Energobit is involved. My feeling is that at a national scale, around 40,000 megawatts are ongoing projects. If we admit that an average of 15% of these projects will be realized, that means 600 megawatts, 6 giga will become real projects in the near future. And this number, it's in line with all the expectations. Yes, new projects will come, new projects will arrive on the market. So I think that the target of 40% renewable energy will be overpassed in the near future. Also, keep in mind the previous picture. For our company, the middle part is very, very important. So medium-size projects, meaning 1, 2, 3, 5 mega, are very, very important. And this represents also a good opportunity for us as a country, but also for us as a company. This is why we at Energobit, we have just introduced in our production some very dedicated solutions for medium scale generation and storage. And namely, it's Robust Solar 1000, which is dedicated in order to connect to the grid medium-sized generation PV projects, but also robust storage, because we hear today that storage is the future, storage is needed, storage will be a good business for the future. So I will say Romanian companies are preparing for the future. Romanian companies are active, and we think that everything that was mentioned today represents real facts, and this is the future. And because, as I already mentioned, this is the last panel. With your permission, I will try to make some conclusions, because in my mind, a lot of those words have been presented today. I'm sorry from our partners working on the gas sector, but my feeling is that the future of energy is electric. Yes, the gas is important, but still the future, it's electric. We have here still the opening of this session, the 3 Ds trend: digitalization, decentralization, decarbonization. And those words appeared in a lot of presentation today. I have tried to, let's say, translate those words also for some people which are not very familiar with those terms. Maybe we have some people looking online. So what does it mean? This means that the electric power became more smart, more efficient, and more environmentally friendly. Those are the trends today. And to finish in an optimistic way, I will say that Romanian companies are already past part of this process of transformations. And with your permission, I will say that also the company that I represent, Energobit, it's part of this process. So I am optimist, and I am saying that the smart is future. And for a smart future, we need smart companies. And who makes the company smart? Smart people make the company smart.
Now, Stefan, would you care to answer to that?
No, the gas is important for the transition. Even energy sustained.
We are beyond this.
Till 2040, we need gas. Yes, 2040. Yes, we need gas. Natural gas and also renewable gas. But we have plans to have a transition till 2040 to have only renewable gases in our grids.
I see Mr. Popa also trying to.
Oh, I was wondering how can we deal without gas even after 2014, because in Romania, if I'll continue to keep my speech.
You keep making friends.
Yeah. There's already 2 steps behind the Europe in all the regulations and all the steps that should do it, and it will be very difficult. By the way, we have a lot of gas in Caragele, we have a lot of gas in offshore. We have gas and we have to use it, because otherwise we'll look to the richest colleagues from Europe, like Germans and Italian and French, and we'll never reach these stations, I'm afraid.
Okay, so the war is on.
So Sorin, I'm happy that I create a debate today. So let's be more specific. I will say that the weight of electrical energy will become more important in the future. It is sure that the gas is necessary, the gas is important, but really we believe that let's say the weight of electric energy will become more and more important for the future.
Okay.
This is the sense of my message.
So we now go to Varinia, because apart from finance, I think the things that she does are also a great enabler for this, and it was very interesting, the second wave. Let me ask you, Varinia, in a sense that we have seen that there has been a first wave, and you know, from the peak we just dropped dramatically, but now we are awaiting this. It's more in terms of installed power, in terms of everything that we need to do, in terms of investment, in terms of money. It's, well, let's say, a higher peak. From your perspective, what would an investor seek when engaging in this second wave, looking more specifically at the regulatory framework or the certainty that these regulations they need to have in place and a sort of a stability?
Thank you very much, Sorin. Very pleased to be here. Thank you, Romanian Energy Center, for the invitation, and congratulations for this longevity. It is a great event, puts Romania at the map in Brussels and not only. As Mr. Popescu said, I think energy, more than ever, plays a key role right now, as it is at the core of our standard of living, and more recently at the core of our security for everyday living, from switching off the lights, heating our homes, and transportation to securing critical services and infrastructure. So the discussion on the future of energy is more ardent than ever. By training and by practice, I'm a lawyer, and by practice, I'm an energy lawyer for 20 years, having worked with both a lot of oil and gas companies, as well as power and renewables. So I'll try to bridge the gap a little bit between the two opinions that were very strongly outlined so far. We do contribute, we work in the last few years in shaping up the legislation in Romania, transposition of the Directive 944, which was long awaited by the market, especially in the power sector, for the reasons of fully deregulation of the market, the possibility for the market participants to conclude freely bilateral power purchase agreements, and many other instruments that the directive brings in, energy communities, and so on. We're also actively working on, as Mr. Dixon mentioned in the previous panel, the CFD, the Contracts for Difference scheme, is another instrument that is long awaited by the investors in the second renewable wave. Why? Because it provides a revenue stabilization stream that is very important for the financing and securing financing. So this hopefully will be rolled out next year. The initial capacities are provisioned for 1.5 gigawatts, and then another second auction later on in 2024. However, I'm confident that if the scheme is going to be successful, it may extend to not only wind and solar, but to hydrogen, perhaps offshore wind, and other type of technologies. Obviously, as lawyers and consultants for all of these new investments coming in, we see the pains, the daily pains of the investors, and I should say this Repower EU is a great moment for us to reconfigure a little bit where we want to stand, and this is the bridging discussion that I meant at the beginning. Is our golden chance to restate our gas industry at the place it deserves, I think. In Romania is the second largest gas producer after Netherlands, and it might be the first one after the Groningen field is shut off. We have proved a few years back, if not modified. And we are now looking with great satisfaction that we have gas from offshore, which has been more than 10-year forecasted and projected and long awaited. But the last bid for concessions in oil and gas was in 2010. We have the possibility as a mature play. We have a lot of data onshore. We have new discoveries onshore, which really prove that there is still gas in Romania, fairly easily accessible. We don't need 10 years exploration to come to that conclusion. This could be done in this moment to help Romania have a smoother transition. As my panel colleague said, Romania's system, the overall system, is very much linked and based on a lot of gas infrastructure. So there is a big question here if we should not jump on this transition to be overly abrupt and expensive, and we can make it better and also play a role. Romania could play a role in the region if we would come up with a fit-for-purpose legislation for gas in this sense, to include other type of gases that were mentioned, biogas, hydrogen. Obviously, we need investments in the transportation system, and we salute the recently announced joint venture between Transgas and the 3Cs Fund, who is going to invest in pipelines. We probably need support schemes for the technologies that are not yet mature enough and self-sustainable, like hydrogen, to kickstart of these investments. And clearly, I'm still of the opinion that we can incentivize onshore production of gas. On the power sector, clearly it was a lot said today. We need a joint up approach on the legislation, on the secondary legislation. We need the permitting to be streamlined, because otherwise all of these great projects that Mr. Pop mentioned and others that are on the market will face extremely high challenges on securing supply chain, getting their approvals on time, securing their financing on time, because of all these other uncertainties will play a role and deter or delay the execution of the project. The supply chain will be another, obviously it's one of the key actions included in the Repower EU, but Romania, why not, could incentivize capacities for production of solar panels, wind turbines, why not? And one other element that I think we discussed off-grid with my co-panelists yesterday is the execution of these projects on time. Romania still lacks the EPC, integrated EPC capabilities and enough resources to tackle all these projects in parallel. We expect that in the next 5 years, there will be, I don't know, 5 gigawatts to be in the grid. There's a big question who is going to be able to execute or import all of those
yeah, and
resources.
from that perspective, maybe at the next edition we will have a follow-up on this. But we are coming back to Livia, actually, who's online. Hello. You were not. I haven't seen you from the beginning, and sorry to miss also your opinion in this gas versus electric discussion, which is.
I will not refrain myself of saying my opinion, of course, or you know me very well.
Yes, of course, but I would maybe try to phrase it in a sense. We have heard about Repower. Of course, in a more general way after Fit for 55, and I'm not quite sure if we managed to comprehend the magnitude of Fit for 55. And now comes Repower. From your perspective again, or from the company that you represent, in terms of this reconversion, this transformation of and the role of the gas industry, how do you see it?
First of all, I want to send all my greetings to the participants to this very nice event. I'm very sorry that I was not present along with you there in Brussels. But I hope that I can give you a more down-to-earth perspective from Bucharest, because I'm coming directly from the Romanian Parliament, where this high-level approach of the European Commission that I've heard today in the previous panels is somehow not so obvious. We are more down to earth, as I said. We are more struggling with energy prices and looking to the end consumers and how can we protect him better in these very harsh days. But indeed, the discussions were very interesting. I have followed the last couple of interventions, and hearing all of you, I might say that it seems that Romania has all the ingredients in order to be a success story. We also have financing exceeding from all sources, from the European Commission, from the financial institutions, but somehow it seems that we are lacking either the recipe or a very skilled chef in order to have this cake baked in due time and delivered to the audience, to the general public, to the end consumer as a very successful story. And in order also to close with this discussion, which is more important, gas or electrification, this dichotomy that is always present in our conversations, and as a company that is representing both distribution and supply for gas and electricity, we are an integrated distribution and supplier. the largest in Romania, I think we should end this conversation and we should recognize the importance of both areas in the energy transition. And by the way, as my technical colleagues are always mentioning, hydrogen is an alternative electrification method. It is the one that is going to facilitate storage for renewables and balance the system. So it's going to be part of the electrification. And so it's not only a molecule of gas, it's also a support of the electrificational process. But in order to come back to your answer and also to develop more on the gas, on the need of using the gas, because Romania has a history, has a profile. It's one of, as Varinia mentioned very well, is one of the main producers of gas in Europe. We cannot deny this. And we should use the gas that we are exploring on our shores. And I think the REPowerEU communication is positioning very well the gas in this context. And all the financing mechanisms are going to support the greenification of gas in the next future. Of course, we are all looking to eliminate the dependency of Russian gas, but we are not going to we are going to use the gas that we are exploring on our territories. I think the infrastructure of gas should be modernized, should be used properly, and should be, of course, subject of greenification. Hydrogen is the rock star of the REPowerEU communication. It is going to be, as I said, one of the main actors of the energy transitions. E.ON, both in Romania and abroad, is one of the main supporters of hydrogen in this energy transition. We are part of the European Alliance for Clean Hydrogen, of the Hydrogen Europe, and we intend to contribute to this hydrogen-based economy that the European Commission is promoting through all the measures these days. I think you have already mentioned, Stefan has already mentioned that we need more strategical and also regulatory-based framework in Romania regarding hydrogen and other alternative gases. This is true. Of course, we also need a market for hydrogen, and this way we should develop this market along with the necessary financing mechanisms. But as I said, we are coming from Germany with the necessary logistics and technology along with our suppliers in order to put this market in place both in Romania and in the region. As I said, our aim is to align the expertise from other parts of Europe to the one in Romania in order to help to shape this hydrogen economy also in Romania. And of course, we are not forgetting about electricity. It's very important to continue to diversify our ways of developing the network, the power network. We are developing projects both with financing from the European programs and from our own resources in order to innovate, to digitalize the power network and prepare for this new energy transition stage. It is also very important not to forget in this in these discussions. I think it's very important not to forget about the end consumer. We talked about I know the limitations of the administrative framework, of the regulatory framework, about the capacities of the state to support this transition, about, as I said, about financing mechanisms or means of development for the near future. But in the end, all of us, we should think about the end consumers. This transition should be affordable for the end consumers, should keep the competitiveness of our companies, both in Romania and of course abroad, in competition with the other companies. And we are facing today an increase in energy prices. So we should find the right mechanisms to deal with that. So in the end, I think this should be the conclusion of the day of today, to put all the efforts in making this transition both affordable and smooth for the companies and our and the households that are the subject in the end, our clients, the subject of this the most important subject of these transitions, apart from the companies that are doing the job, are making the distribution and the supplying, and also providing the equipment and the services for putting in place this transition, not to forget about the end consumers.
Okay, thank you. But then let's discuss about the end consumers. There is a perception, maybe, okay, that we will just pass through this energy prices crisis. But then before that, there was an increasing talk about the cost of the green transition. Yes, and in a sense, how would you, Mr. Popa, explain to your constituents that they need to pay more for green energy, or if this is the case, or if this is not a perception, or if it's not reality, then, as Livia said, how would you tackle this discussion in the sense of we can do green without increasing the prices, by incentivizing, by offering support for investments? But in the end, my personal belief is that we all have access to the same amount of money, no matter how we distribute it, somebody is going to pay.
Livia is right, as always, she is right. And
ladies are always right.
Yeah, the European climate change offensive is important, but we have to move forward a little bit precautionary, to use this word. I'm not so sure it's the correct one, but do not forget an electrolyte, which is the hardcore or an installation producing hydrogen. It takes 3 years. If you pay an order tomorrow, Siemens will deliver in 3 years. And in the whole world, there are only 14 companies can deliver these installations. So when we assume 2030 as a target for Green Deal, package 54-55 or others frameworks, is important to understand if the whole market and the whole industry, energy industry, is ready to step forward. Otherwise, we will face this reality as we have now in Romania. We all want to be as Germans, as French, Italians, and the others, but we cannot. We just cannot. Romania has an advantage because we have this gas. I'm sorry for Mr. Pop, but I will keep my point of view, and I have a lot of understand in this way, but I'm not so sure we are ready to switch to this green deal.
But developing gas costs as well.
Developing gas cost as well, and the Romanian customers should be protected as the companies that are paying the taxes in the industry. They're also important to protect, because if we create frameworks that are not helping the industry and the final client, otherwise we're just white papers.
Mr. Pop, from your perspective, end consumer and relation with the costs in this, let's not call it electrification, but greenification.
It is sure that first of all, it's important to have the switch to renewable energy. This is because I think that there is no alternative for tomorrow. If we are thinking on the medium term or on the long term, this is one of the solutions that we have in mind today. And it's not a theoretical one, it's a practical one. Yes, we could have additional theoretical solutions, like I remember Super Phoenix coming from France, but this is still theoretical solution. And the practical solution for, once again, not for tomorrow, but for the day after tomorrow, for the future, that we have in mind today is still renewable energy. So we will be forced. So it's a transition which is necessary. Like it was the transition, I don't know, 150 or 200 years ago, like it was another transition 100 years ago, this one will be necessary. Yes, it is sure that each transition means a cost, but as you mentioned, the money, we have the money, and when we say we, I think the whole Europe, we have the money. We have to be smart enough in order to find solution how to spend the money, and also we as a country, we have to be smart enough in order to find the solution, not only to give, let's say, incentives to everyone who wants to invest, but in my mind we have to reward those who invest. And in my mind, the reward, it's coming after the fact, not before. Please.
Yes. I don't think we have the money in Europe. We must consider also all the deficits in the big countries, in France. 14% of
Romania
the GDP.
as well.
Romania as well, but Romania it's not a contributor to the to European funds. It's Germany, it's France. We have in those countries also the pressure of the rearmament, the defense expenses now in the context with the competition with Russia, with China. So we have social problem because the energy is not only an energy issue, it's political, but also a social. You saw the Yellow Vest movement in France. They block the government, the action of the government. So it is very difficult, and we need also to keep in mind the competitiveness. I'm sorry, I study in France, so French is my first language. So when I speak in English, I must to reflect more, to find the words. The competitivity of our economy. We cannot transform our energy system with any cost. I cannot agree with this. I know this is the direction. We mustn't oppose when we have industrial revolution because it's important, but not by suicide. And we cannot reduce the energy transition only to Europe because we live in a global economic system. When you will have China with very competitive prices in energy, they will have also industrial competitive prices also. So we have also the problem of the stability in Middle East. We have economies based on the export of hydrocarbons, even if these countries make many efforts in order to transform the economy to greener their exports.
Okay, but what I understand, and I think Mr. Pop, because I was working with end consumers, telling them that they have no alternative, it's not really a good message. But I understand that basically renewable in terms of cost, in terms of technology, this have decreased, and this makes it or makes them a better alternative for the future. And Wesley, if you're looking at in financing, of course, a projected price of any specific project would be a key. How do you look at this affordability from the end customer? You're basically financing an SPV, the developer, but then the project has to produce money. How do you look at this prices issue?
Well, yeah, investors are focused clearly on returns, risk-adjusted returns, and this speaks to what Ms. Marina was speaking about earlier about the permitting and the certainty of the operating environment of the project and the speed and ability to execute the project and enjoy the returns of that project over the intended life of that project. And we're seeing a lot of private sector capital being much more interested in alternatives, as they call it, which includes very much renewable energy. As they seek different asset classes to invest their resources in. You've got pension funds and insurance companies that have very long dated liabilities, and they're looking very much for long dated cash flow streams, particularly ones that are inflation linked or have some cost adjustment mechanism to them, as often do electricity tariffs. So I think there's a key to unlocking that private sector capital is finding the right structures and power purchase agreements or mechanisms in the market that enables investors to get comfort with a lower return, maybe initially, but having a certainty of return over the life of the project and some adjustment mechanisms or nuances to the markets that gives them a hedge against their future liabilities, such as you have facing the pension funds and insurance companies, which frankly have the biggest, deepest pools of capital in the private sector. So it's no question that the private sector capital is going to have to be a significant part of the solution. And how do we create the vehicles for them to enter the market? We're in the process of doing that, but certainly there is room for improvement. And then the regulatory certainty is something that's very critical. And when you start then throwing windfall profit taxes or other unforeseen regulatory adjustments into the mix, that gives pause to a process that was gaining momentum. But I still think the momentum is there. I do think the regulators and the officials understand that you can't trample on investor rights and expect to see a flood of private capital into the sector, which is what is needed to fix the problem.
Understood. So, Varinia, from your perspective, this balance between investors and consumers, what's your thought on that?
Thank you, Sorin. I think we all agreed that in the future is electric in the medium and long term. This is the situation. So
Livia is following.
Well, I pleaded for gas, but in the short run. But I guess looking at transforming the way we consume energy and protecting the end consumer and the industry. I just wanted to make a point. I think 40% of the power consumption in Europe is coming from municipal consumption. So I wanted to raise an issue that municipalities can play an important role in securing long-term power purchase agreements from the lowest cost power producer, which is probably going to be renewables, in order to have visibility, predictability on what the cost of us will be for lighting up our house. And that means we see projects behind the meter projects, so let's say private wire projects. What we call is, for example, power generation dedicated for specific consumption of municipal buildings, for example, schools, hospitals, and so on and so forth, or simply municipalities being prepared to play a role in engaging in negotiating long-term power purchase agreements with generators. This would obviously be, let's say, a tool to alleviate the volatility of the
bring
prices.
lower costs.
Bring lower costs. And then for the industry, by the same token, we see a lot of companies who have a high cost for energy in their production cycle that are seeking solutions to reduce their costs of energy. And in specifically talking about power, we see them seeking to secure their own generation capacities, as I said, behind the meter projects. And the market comes ahead of the regulations actually and brings solutions for this to happen. Again, this means an investment, but in terms of financing, this is very clearly a greenfield investment that has very clear financial and economical calculations. And one last thing I want to say, that we need a PPA market in Romania. Although it's been permitted by law since 2020 and more recently for everybody clearly stated in the new electricity law, we still don't have a liquid PPA market. Last year in Europe, over 30 gigawatts were sold using this type of agreements. I understand that the market fundamentals have changed. The utilities and the big traders are still reluctant to engage in long-term PPAs, but at least these are critical for securing financing. And so I encourage you, there is a template agreement even produced by EFED, by European Traders Association. We produced the guidelines for the Romanian market in case this is a tool for making the negotiations easier, let's say, including the specificities of the Romanian legislation. So hopefully we see more of that in the future.
So we can
to
count
round up this exercise of building new
Okay,
renewable
as a follow-up, Michael, let's count how many PPAs next year we will count. And Livia, not last, not least, you are dealing, you said, with basically, I think, a couple of hundreds of thousands of customers on a daily basis. Would you think that people would pay more for green gas or renewable power? Let me give you an example I mean, from the steel industry, I know if you are making sustainable steel, there are customers that are willing to pay a premium for that. But in a sense, when dealing with the customer on a day-to-day basis, and this goes also to the awareness, I think, that we need to create among people why green, indeed, but from a practical perspective. Are they willing to pay more for green gas or power?
First of all, I think it's all about education. It's about educating ourselves as providers, and it's about educating our customers. It's about educating the authorities in order to promote greener energy, greener means of transportation, and of course to start with the new generations. For sure, the new generations are looking for greener means of energy and transportation. And this is our main target in the end, to ensure a greener environment for them, for our kids, for their kids, and to preserve the resources that we have, because of course the resources are not limited. But I would like also to answer to your question, how we can make this transition easier and also more affordable for the end consumers if they intend to use greener means of energy. And you are the most respected consultant in European funds that I know, and you know that we are sharing the same opinion in this. If we are going to use wisely free money that are on in this moment available for Romania, for sure the energy transition in Romania is going to be cheaper. And of course we should increase our capabilities, our administrative capacity in implementing projects, development projects, both at private but also at public level. And of course to change perspective and attitude towards the investment in the energy sector. I'm very disappointed to end like this today, but today somebody from the Ministry of European Funds told me that for the cohesion funds, the energy projects are not a priority and we should revert to other forms of financing like the modernization fund or CEF energy. This is not the right attitude. And I'm saying this today in the end of this conference because you are in Brussels, and I hope that this message in Brussels is going to be heard. The financing mechanisms that are available, both at national and European level, should put energy as a priority. We are living very complicated days, and I think we should understand that energy should be put it on the first place in the center of all the financing mechanisms that we have available. And this will make the transition easier and also cheaper for our end consumers.
Thank you for that. And I think we are towards the end of our panel. You mentioned new generation, but then I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Havrilescu with his always wise thoughts and opinions, and looking, in a sense, from above the way or the themes that have been discussed today. So enlighten us.
I have the floor.
Okay, for the first, I want to congratulate Mr. Cornel Bodea for these events organized in Brussels, where all businesses are managed by the different institutions. But we are in respect with DGNR, the institution which was very supportive for the Romanian energy sector transformation that was started in 2012, and we started with liberalization process for energy and natural gas, and we finished successfully in 2016 at a level of 15 euros per megawatt in natural gas prices, and about there was 150 led, it's meaning 14, 18 euros per megawatt hour. This moment we are discussing about the 100 euros per megawatt in natural gas and 200 euros for electricity. And turning back, I have to mention that we had very good support from European Commission, and we realized important changes in the electricity and the energy sector. We listed some state company in the stock exchange and in the minor sharing part, but we did success listing the most important Romanian electric company, Elsa Electrica, privatized, there was a privatizing activity on the stock exchange for the first time in Romania. And in my opinion, that was best, or however, much more transparency than in another situation. We were assisted every time from the DGNR, and we are very thankful for this support. Now we are back in Brussels, and I want to point out that my first participation in Romanian Energy Day was 11 years back, and that time I was not just nominated in the regulatory authority as a president, and that's why I participated every your meetings in Brussels. Brussels is a very good position in order to have a relationship with the most important actors in the energy sector, institutional, coming from the different NGOs, and having contact with the most important actors from the European market. I was intrigued about the issue that Florin has launched about the importance of the natural gas. In my opinion, it's that we have to be very careful when we are making statements against one or another form of energy, because most important energy property is versatility. They are changing their form. You can change electricity in water. You can change electricity in hydrogen. You can use any kind of energy, and we cannot say which kind of energy is much more important. And it happened several years ago. I was also in regulatory authority in Romania, and participated in a conference organized by the power plants in the nuclear area. And the most issue that they launched was has the power nuclear power future. every of them, the participants were saying that they are supporting because the nuclear energy is clean one and it's very safe. And when came my round, I started with this statement: if the nuclear energy has a future, then we don't. We as a humanity. And not just for the permanent I don't know, dangerous activity due to radiation, but also Romanian energy sector in that moment wasn't prepared to sustain with a fund like we started to sustain the renewables with the green certificates status. The green certificates are supported by the Romanian consumers, and it's very, very hard to impose another solution to be covered by the consumers. One asked me, why did not the government invest directly? It's very hard to declare, to convince someone that the government has no ability to invest, to manage, to operate, but most important, the governments cannot be subject of state aids or European aids. That's why the government cannot be involved. And then also, in my opinion, that the state is natural born killer of economy. We cannot give positive examples in this area. But returning to our issue, repowering Europe, I calculate that in the next few years, until 2030, Romania will be European fund in amount of 30 billion euro. 13 are coming from modernization fund, 4 to 5 billion are coming from the resilience and the national plan. Some billion are coming from Just Transition Fund, and maybe there are some small funds like Innovative or some kind of them. So if the support will be of 30% coming from the European funds, it's meaning that until 2030, the investors have to put 45 to 50 billion euro. There will be amount of 70 billion euro until 2030. We cannot imagine that we spend this huge amount of money, or we have to make something, establishing some rules that are in this moment proposed by the EU Repower EU. But there are some proposals very, very good, and they can be put it in the Romanian legislation in order to simplify permitting and bureaucracy in this area. But also we have to have, at first, we have to convince the investors to invest in Romania, to invest foreign investors, but Romanian investors having a very important, predictable and stable framework for legislation. I have experience in the regulatory authority, which was involved in the secondary legislation issued process, but also I was involved several years in the Ministry of Energy, another institution that are involved in the legislation of secondary legislation, but proposal of the primary legislation. In Romania, it's very, very hard to maintain predictability and stability. My main goal when I was in regulatory authority was to respect a statement of mine that the best regulation that can authority made, it's deregulation. This is about the competition. And also another statement, but maybe it was a joke, but in several years I'm sure that it's not a joke. It's very serious things. I said that in Romania, a single thing is predictable, that nothing is predictable, just instability. Instability in the energy sector, maybe it's coming also from the natural causes, because we can see that actually in the European Commission there were several steps for modifying, for removing of the policy. We started in 2012 to put in place some regulation coming from the third energy package. Then we started with another policy, energy policy, in order to attempt to have a success in 2030 of 34 coming from the renewables. In this moment, they changed to up to 45 until 2030. Then it was the program for the Fit for 55. And in this moment, we have Repower EU. Each of these action are a sign of instability. But as I mentioned, the instability coming from the natural causes. No one predicted what is happening in this moment in Ukraine. That's why I am saying that we, in the end, that we cannot state that one of other form of energy has future or is without future, because of these versatilities of those form of energy, and also we cannot predict what is happening in the area, in the nearest area, as a political changes that are affecting the energy sector, because if we know energy sector, it's in this moment it's unified. We have a common energy market, European common energy market, and also in the nearest Europe states with the in the southeast and region. One thing is sure, that no thing is sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haveles. Thank you, Sorin. Thank you, everybody. However, it would be unfair from my side to thank all of you for coming here, because I was just a very small part of organizing this event. So if you can bear with me 1 minute, I would like to invite with me here Mr. Corneliu Boda, Irina Nitsa, Mihaela, Marian, Frank, Mr. Haveles once again, because Mr. Haveles, can you please join us on stage? You are part of the organizing committee. Mihaela. Okay. Marian also. Mihaela also, but not the least. So we do this event since 2012. In theory, it should be easier each year, one after another. But under this complex context and all these issues that are being more and more complicated, it was again a tough, and I think you all agree, it was a tough edition to organize. But thank you all. Thank you, Premier Energy, for helping us organize this event. Thank you to our media partners. Thank you to our speakers, to our moderators. Thank you to our technical support.
Thank you.
Anything else?
See you next year.
So thank you and see you next year.
See you next year. Thank you very much.
Bye.